pretender, a super gold digger.
Looking like clowns.
We are supposed to be free and independent.
The Ponzi scheme may not be the greatest scam. There is one we never talk about. The invasion of Africa. How death and suffering caused by sanctions in Zimbabwe and other African countries is not a violation of human rights, yet constitutional laws in African countries is considered a violation of human rights. How was the invasion of Libya by NATO forces not considered a crime against humanity by the ICC? Scammed of wealth, deprived of sovereignty, and trapped in covenants that barely serve mutual interests, it's always been Africa against the world. As the trauma of slavery lingers in the minds of Africans, the rich and powerful continue to feed on Africa's natural resources at a price of nothing and a cost of perpetual poverty. While millions of Africans live in poverty, the orchestrators of this misery are busy handing out tokens of aid under their own terms and conditions. It is reported that France gets 16% of its uranium supply from Niger, one of the poorest countries in the world. France is believed to hold a stock of this precious metal that can last up to 2 years. This is a true story of how Africa was scammed of her wealth and independence. In this video, we look at the sad reality of systematic looting and ending political instabilities and a possibility that all these are being facilitated by someone outside the continent. Africa never had much say in the establishment of organizations like the UN and the World Bank, and nor is she fairly represented there. And these are treaties signed when Africa barely had any form of independence or experts to interpret what exactly was being signed for. There have been numerous accusations that aid to Africa is used to compromise objectivity, as leaders only exist to please funders. Power belongs to the West, fear and compromise belong to Africa. But this is by no means an excuse for self-pity and making excuses. Africans must stand tall and be counted. And it all begins with the right leadership and solidarity against any form of injustice.
Not come 4,000 miles. Just spend 5 minutes and go back. This is not a theater and I'm not an actor.
Africa is not poor. She's only relatively poor because her counterparts are 500 years ahead of time. The Genesis. Before the 14th century, Africa was at the same level of development with Europe and America. Home to the richest man ever to live on earth, Mansa Musa, a man who owned half of the world's gold and whose wealth record has lived for more than 700 years, since 1324. Though the true value of his wealth is still indescribable, one thing is for sure: he's richer than Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos combined. Sadly, the dawn of the 12th century would be the last time Africa would challenge the G7 economies. The pace of global transformation was set rolling around the 14th century, the same time slave trade worsened. The precursor to all this was the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the steam engines. Industrial Revolution resulted in mass production, while steam engines enabled easy movement of goods and raw materials, and this was a turning point in Africa's poverty. While the two stimulated global trade and investment, they carried alongside them criminal practices. Foreigners took advantage of unfocused leaders in Africa to fully exploit the continent and set systems that will only benefit their interests to this day. Tens of millions of Africans were enslaved to provide free labor, while majority died due to diseases, colonial wars, and inhuman treatment in slave camps. It is estimated that over 12 million Africans were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade, and 15% of those died before reaching their slave destination.
Slave trade went on here for 400 years. These idiot chiefs were here just putting on monkey skins and so on. Looking like clowns.
Half of the infants born during slavery died in the first year of life. By 1820, there were nearly 4 African slaves for every single European. This generational deficit continues to impact Africa to this day, negatively of course. For hundreds of years, Africa has been plagued by poor governance, nepotism, and corruption. The continent is firmly held in poverty, living in the shadows of the nations they helped build. And all this is rooted deep in an ecosystem of fraud, corruption, and civil conflicts. Major problems can be traced to slave trade, colonialism, and the highly sophisticated modern-day imperialism delivered through systems and policies that govern the world. For more than 300 years, between 1526 and 1867, Africa supplied millions of slaves abroad at a price of present-day suffering. This translates into 300 years of being left behind. And that's not all. There is another horror: colonialism, stretching from 1800 to 1975, consequently leading to over 150 years of Africa being left behind.
Last year, Germany apologized for atrocities committed in Namibia in the colonial era. Between 1904 and 1908, German soldiers killed tens of thousands of Ovaherero and Nama people in what became known as the first genocide of the 20th century.
Harsh as it may sound, by the end of colonialism, Africa was 500 years behind the rest of the world. Today, more than 500 million Africans live in poverty, implying that for every 100 years of lost time, 100 million Africans would be condemned into poverty.
Why is Africa so screwed up in the minds of many people?
It is absolutely screwed up.
So much poverty, so many wars, so much corruption, so many leaders who loot their countries rather than building them up. I mean, many people point to you as an exception, but you're a lonely exception. There are not so many.
The rise of corruption, wars, and conflicts. This is a story of ruthless betrayal and dishonesty, a practice fueled by slave trade and colonialism. Slave traders would bribe African leaders with cheap commodities like salt and linen in exchange of slaves and signing of exploitative agreements. Even after fighting hard for independence, African leaders didn't have political systems and infrastructure to run governments. They couldn't even trade amongst themselves, as the divide and rule approach by colonialists had left many countries without credible neighbors or regional infrastructure. Governments were forced to embrace capitalism, and this meant hiring Europeans and Americans who knew it best, implying that independence was lost sooner than it was declared. Corruption escalated as many government officials would be bribed to keep quiet on administrative and mining affairs in Africa. Those that refused to comply died a mysterious death. This arrangement is feared to be continuing to this day. Since the continent had been divided according to colonial territories, it meant that wars and conflicts would be used to protect colonies. African societies wouldn't see eye to eye as dictated by their colonial masters. This and other factors like varying languages bred civil wars and regional conflicts which have persisted to this day.
The devastating wars incubated by these policies in Africa, the Middle East, and other parts of the world, alliances and power blocks, coalitions of the willing are the preferred tools in order to breach international law.
It is believed that all military and civil wars in Africa have a foreign hand involved. Once development gathered momentum and Africa continued to push for fair treatment, the worlds above crafted a mechanism for a more respectful and inclusive world. This saw the formation of bodies like the United Nations or the UN, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund or the IMF, among others. While these have seen a more civilized and stable world, their independence, objectivity, and balance of administrative power have been questioned. Here is a quote from His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of the Republic of South Africa.
Boards of directors of your multilateral institutions are not made up of independent directors. They are largely internal people or shareholders. So that in itself, for us, it's an important reform.
Majority of policies here are based on global standards, yet Africa is 500 years behind the rest of the world. For example, poverty is measured in terms of US dollars in Africa, where majority of local currencies are much weaker than the US dollar.
The issue of currency is top on the agenda. So we are going to discuss it.
Africans hardly participated in the formation of the UN, the World Bank and IMF, yet the majority of African countries are signatory to these covenants. These organizations have made regrettable decisions like the assassination of Colonel Muammar el-Gaddafi, which resulted in political backward and untold suffering in Libya.
It was not in our national interest to let that happen. I refused to let that happen.
And so the attack began. One question has hovered over this mission. How is it in the strategic interests of the United States to go to war in Libya?
Do you think Libya posed an actual or imminent threat to the United States?
No, it was not. It was not a vital national interest to the United States, but it was an interest.
We have seen sanctions that have resulted in untold suffering and misery in Africa, in countries like Zimbabwe, by bodies like IMF and the World Bank, undermining the core of these organizations.
The illegal sanctions are an albatross to the development, well-being and prosperity of the people of Zimbabwe.
Only 4 countries have representatives on the UN Security Council, and none of them is African, yet Africa is a continent that struggles with most wars and conflicts.
And we have asked and asked and asked and asked and asked, reform the Security Council.
No surprise, President William Ruto of Kenya called for holistic reformation or dissolving altogether of organizations like IMF and World Bank in favor of a more inclusive organization.
In terms of development financing architecture, the global system is rigged against African progress. We need a new financial architecture, and we want those resources controlled not by IMF and World Bank, because IMF and World Bank, you have the final say. We don't have no say.
These organizations have defined all aspects of life, from human rights to global currency, without significant input from Africa. This has led to economic, social, and cultural contradictions. The result has been what looks as a deliberate effort to keep underdeveloped economies in check by imposing what is undesirable on them. Policies that look like weapons to sustain political and economic control. Uganda is currently facing suspension of loans from the World Bank because of passing a local legislation which was constitutional and assented to by the president.
So shallow, so egocentric, so wrong, but they think they know everything, broadcast their ignorance all over the place. This is a wrong battleground for them.
The level of civilization globally is different, as many Africans struggle to obtain formal education. Thus, the enforcement of human rights may be different and at a different level, and methods used should be different. Let's listen to what His Excellency Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, had to say to a French journalist.
You know, these two worlds where there are people who know everything about human rights and all kinds of things, and another world where people are just people who don't know. When we respect the things we respect in our countries, it's not for you, it's not for anybody else, it's for ourselves. Then you don't become the judge yourself. You don't start telling the others what to do, what they should not do, or that what they are doing is not to your satisfaction. Who are you? In fact, maybe you need to be looking around in Europe. You are violating people's rights. When we have this problem of people being bundled and sent back to sink in the Mediterranean and so on, and so many people being mistreated in your own country, you really need to stop this superiority complex nonsense about human rights. You think you are the only ones who respect human rights, or others it's about violating human rights. No.
The unfortunate reality of poverty is one that has eluded global experts, defied prayers of the faithful, and continues to bully generations. The most important question, however, should be, Who really controls Africa, and how was that control obtained?
The attitude of adult supervision has to be left in the past. Examples of right or wrong conduct can be found everywhere. We must avoid the temptation to reduce Africa to the lowest common denominator with blanket judgments and generalizations.
Slave remains the worst criminal offense to go unpunished, still waiting for that decent compensation to Africa for the lost opportunities, lives, dignity, and invaluable wealth. The difference between Africa and the rest of the world is 500 years lost, when everyone was developing at the expense of Africa. There is more content on this channel you can check out. There is a video on Ghana. There is a video on ending poverty in Africa. And did you ever know that there is a Pan-African brand that sells globally? MTN. There is a video on the rise and dominance of MTN, and another video on that part will be coming soon. This video would be useless if you didn't watch it. Thank you so much for watching until this end. My name is Francis. Please click the like button, leave a comment, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. 15% of proceeds from this channel go to charity. This is a young channel that needs your full support to grow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's keep it Africa.